You know, there were a few takeaways, but probably the one well, I guess I wasn't shocked by it, but the sort of the energy behind it is, of course, this desire, even seemingly a need, to decouple the conservation compliance from the crop insurance program, and that was a late amendment in the Senate version of the bill. The Senate did a great job, like I said earlier, just getting the bill passed out, demonstrate great statesmanship and compromise. That late amendment seems to be a bit of a kind of a deal killer for a number of our producers. So it is my hope that they can get that decoupled in the House. I don't know that they will, but I'm hopeful that they do. So that was one of the big takeaways. The other one being, clearly, these farmers, these producers, and the groups, they know their business. And while they appreciate the safety net that a robust crop insurance program provides it, they are not interested in having a lot of strings attached to it. They're not interested in Washington telling them how to farm, but rather providing that safety net that, by the way, they pay for as producers. They're paying for this crop insurance program. So, to me, the takeaway was rich, frankly. Not any big, huge surprises, but rich. The other thing, and it's never hurts to be reminded of it, and that is that food comes from the farmer and from the rancher, not from the supermarket. And while we sometimes out here in North Dakota, and especially in public life, we think, well, certainly everybody understands that. We deal with it and work with it every single day, and yet here we find that it's a continuation. That every generation needs to be reminded that hamburger comes from a cow, right? And that bread comes from a wheat field, and that even that ethanol comes from corn. So, it was all good stuff. It was rich, as I said. And what encourages me is that on short notice we're able to accumulate the kind of wealth of information. The representation around this table, frankly, is very heartening to me. It demonstrates how important this topic is, but it also demonstrates to me how important who represents agriculture in Washington is, and I'm certainly encouraged by this show of interest.
Which version of the bill do you support right now, the Senate bill or the House?
Well, I like the Senate bill. This tying the conservation programs, the conservation compliance to the crop insurance program has to be removed. I mean, that is a part of the Senate bill that I regret is there. I'm certainly hopeful that the more conservative House will get that removed. As you heard from these producers, the burden of those regulations on them almost makes the whole thing not workable. So while I like the Senate version, that's got to be taken out. The thing I do like about the House version as well, though, is that it does find greater savings, and that those savings are not on the backs of farmers and ranchers, but rather would come from what has become a perpetual welfare state that we cannot continue to support with a $16 trillion debt. We need to find a way to not make people permanently dependent on the government for their food, but to help them find a job. And we need to get this economy going again, and that's another topic. But the pushback from liberals on the deeper cuts in the food programs and the nutrition programs, I think illustrates how out of touch they are with the economic challenges of our country.
What do you have to say to people who depend on these programs?
Well, what I would say to them is you shouldn't be dependent on a government program. That's not the way our system is built. This is the land of opportunity, and I worry whether it's where it's perpetual unemployment benefits or perpetual food stamps. We are in a time now where 1 out of 7 people are on food stamps in this country. I say come to North Dakota and look for work. We know how to do it here. And so the problem with having perpetual programs that provide people with food or income is that you take away their dignity and you eliminate their need to be productive and to go find a job. We're at a point now where half of the people in this country don't pay taxes. Now, that's an indictment that we have got to reverse, or we're going to be in one of those irrevocable situations where European-style socialism rules the day. And that's why this election is so critical.
Today's the first time you've come out talking about the farm bill,
Sure.
and Pam Galton's obviously kind of hit you pretty hard on that, or at least
I hadn't
Reporters.
noticed, but okay.
She's been saying, well, why is he silent? Why isn't he saying
Sure.
anything? Why wait until now to talk about it?
Well, today was the perfect time, I think, for a House candidate to lay out some agricultural positions and have some discussion, because today is the day that the U.S. House of Representatives started debating the bill. One of the things I haven't done, and I'm going to work very hard to avoid, is making this a harshly partisan issue. I think one of the great things about the Senate bill was that it was bipartisan. One of the encouraging things about this initial House markup is that it was bipartisan, where Chairman Lucas, the Republican, and our own Colin Peterson right across the river, the ranking Democrat, came together and brought a bill together. That's what gives me encouragement. And so for me to sort of make it a harshly partisan issue, I don't think is beneficial to my campaign, nor is it beneficial to the dialogue. I think what we demonstrated, I suspect there are a number of people around the table that aren't going to vote for me. That wasn't one of the criteria for being here. I hope they all do, but I was more interested in learning, frankly, than anything today.
Are you concerned about House leadership, at least in terms of Cantor and the likes of them, basically holding the bill?
I do have some concern about that, I suppose, but that's why I want to be there, to do my part to move them along, to get them on the right side of this issue, to be part of this education process that we heard about today. The thing that I think we have to be heartened by is that the budget guidelines that were given to the committee didn't prevent the committee from having a good bill, and that the cuts that were being demanded by leadership are in fact being presented by the committee. Again, the committee providing the sort of the policy side of it within the parameters of the bigger budget issues. So I think the process is working the way it's supposed to work. But yeah, once in a while you're going to have leadership on one side or another, depending on who you are, that you're not in agreement with, and that's when you flex your muscles and leverage a little bit.
Last question. You're endorsed by both Club for Growth and
Sure.
Freedom Works, and
Yeah.
both of them have come out against the farm bill,
Sure.
severely against the farm bill.
Sure.
What do you have to say to that?
Well, that is one area where, frankly, I thought that my positions on agriculture were going to be the reason I didn't get those endorsements. But we did have a discussion about it, and I pushed pretty hard. I said, look, guys, the reality is that at that point, the Senate version of the bill, at the time that I was interviewing them, was pretty prominent, talking about $23.6 billion worth of cuts. I said, can you imagine if every agency, every bill, every program actually found real cuts, how much better off we'd be? And the other thing I said to them is, the reality in America and the reality in North Dakota is that every country is going to protect its food supply. At least every sophisticated country in the world does that. We've always done that. It's important that we do that, and that's the position I take, and that's the position that I take. Now, having said that, I appreciate what I heard today about reforms that are market-based, that allow the markets to work, and I think we've seen that transition. The Senate bill was certainly a transition more toward that, and I think that in the end we'll see more of that. So it's all going the right direction. You don't agree with everybody that endorses you, much like I don't know how much Pam Gullison agrees with Nancy Pelosi and Henry Waxman. I wouldn't want to defend their position on most things. I expect and respect the fact that you don't always agree with 100% of the people that support you. You're good?
Okay.
You didn't want that quiet part over the sort of paper. Come on.